The night was silent, and the road seemed endless. The steady hum of the truck's engine filled the air when, in the distance, a flickering light caught João's attention. He squinted, trying to make out what he was seeing. A car sat on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing, as if asking for help. At first, it seemed like just another driver with mechanical trouble. But something didn't add up. João slowed down, and as he got closer, he began to notice quick movements inside the vehicle. The shadows within didn't look like people talking or waiting for assistance. They were sharp, chaotic, as if a silent struggle was taking place. João's heart began to race. Instinct told him something was wrong, very wrong. A glance in the rearview mirror revealed an empty road stretching for miles. No other cars, no signs of life. The feeling of isolation only heightened the tension. A light drizzle reflected in the headlights, adding to the gloom. For a moment, he considered driving on. After all, anyone could walk into an ambush on a deserted road. But then, a sudden movement inside the car made his breath catch. He could clearly see a small figure pressed against the back door, while a larger shadow loomed over it. João gripped the steering wheel tightly. This wasn't a simple cry for help. Something serious was happening, and he knew that if he didn't act fast, it could be too late. Time seemed to slow, each second a crushing weight on his shoulders. The decision had to be made right there in that instant, and it was there, in the darkness of the road, that he realized his life was about to change forever. If this story has already made your heart race in the opening moments, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. João was a simple man, with a calm voice and a serene manner, yet his presence inspired confidence. At 42, he had spent half his life behind the wheel, crossing the country from end to end. He transported food, parts, and whatever the job required, always keeping the same goal in mind, to reach his destination and return home safely. His family lived in the countryside where life was quieter. His wife, Maria, ran a small shop, and their 10-year-old son eagerly awaited each phone call to share the latest news from school. João's routine was always the same. He left early in the morning or, often, hit the road at night, when traffic was lighter and the cooler temperatures were better for the engine. He enjoyed the solitude of the road, the constant hum of the motor, and the sight of lights fading in the rearview mirror. Between stretches, he stopped at familiar gas stations, where attendants and clerks greeted him by name. There, he exchanged stories with other truckers, talking about the hardships of the job, the longing for home, and the small victories that came day by day. He never considered himself a hero, just someone doing what was necessary to support his family. Still, he carried within him a strong sense of duty and justice. He couldn't stand to see injustice and, whenever possible, helped other drivers in dangerous situations or with mechanical troubles. To João, the road was more than just a job. It was an invisible community of people who looked out for one another. That night, he was on yet another trip. His truck, loaded with food, moved steadily, with about 5 hours left until his next stop. The radio played softly, old songs helping the time pass. João drove calmly until a car parked far ahead broke the monotony of the journey. He didn't know it yet, but the decision he was about to make would not only change the life of an entire family, but also ensure his name would be remembered forever. The road stretched endlessly under the pale glow of the moon, its silence broken only by the steady hum of the truck's engine. João had been driving for hours, the hypnotic rhythm of the tires against the asphalt making the journey feel almost timeless. But then, something ahead broke the monotony. A faint flicker of light pulsed in the distance, growing brighter with every passing second. His eyes narrowed. It was a car, parked on the shoulder with its hazard lights blinking in the darkness. At first it seemed ordinary, perhaps a flat tire or an overheated engine. João had seen that 1,000 times before. But as he approached, a wave of unease swept over him. The way the car sat, angled awkwardly toward the road, didn't look right. The driver's door was slightly ajar, and the silhouette inside moved with sharp, unnatural motions. There was no sign of anyone standing outside, no attempt to flag him down. Instinctively, João slowed the truck, keeping a cautious distance. He leaned forward, scanning the scene. That was when he caught sight of something that made his stomach knot. A small figure in the back seat, pressed against the door. The faint interior light revealed a child's face, pale and frightened, eyes darting toward the movement in the front of the car. Another figure loomed over them, its arm jerking in a way that spoke not of assistance, but of control and threat. The isolation of the night hit him hard. No other vehicles in sight, no help within reach. It was just him, the truck, and whatever was happening inside that car. His mind raced through possibilities: an accident, a family dispute, or something far worse. Each second he hesitated felt like an eternity, yet his instincts told him the situation was escalating. João tightened his grip on the wheel, his heartbeat quickening. The road ahead was no longer just a route to his delivery. It had become the stage for a decision that could mean the difference between life and death. And he knew that in moments like this, there was no turning back. João's truck crawled forward, its headlights cutting through the mist and rain. Every inch brought the scene into sharper focus, and with it, the dread growing in his chest. He could now see the man in the driver's seat more clearly, one hand gripping the steering wheel, while the other moved towards something on the seat beside him. The second figure in the passenger seat shifted abruptly, and João caught the glint of metal in the dim light. A weapon. The child in the back seat was still pressed into the corner, frozen, eyes locked on the stranger beside them. There was no doubt now. This was no accident. This was a family in danger. And João was the only one close enough to intervene. He instinctively reached for the radio, his fingers hovering over the microphone. Calling for the police seemed the logical choice, but he knew it would take far too long for help to arrive. Out here, in the middle of a lonely stretch of highway, minutes felt like hours. The window of opportunity was closing. His thoughts raced. He could keep driving, pretend he hadn't seen anything, and stay safe. But that wasn't who he was. Images of his own son flashed through his mind. What if it were his boy trapped in that car? Could he live with himself, knowing he had done nothing? João eased his foot off the accelerator and let the truck coast. His breathing was heavy, steadying himself for whatever he would do next. He scanned the road ahead, looking for any way to position his massive vehicle as a shield without putting the family in more danger. The rain streaked across the windshield, the rhythmic swish of the wipers only amplifying the tension. He knew one thing with certainty. If he didn't act within the next few seconds, the outcome would be irreversible. And as he tightened his grip on the wheel, João realized that the quiet, uneventful night he had expected was gone. He was about to cross a line from which there was no return. João's pulse pounded in his ears as he shifted gears, the truck's massive engine growling in response. The decision had been made. There was no room for hesitation now. He pressed the accelerator, not to ram the car, but to position his 18-wheeler in a way that would cut off any possible escape. The size and weight of his vehicle would be his greatest weapon, and the family's only shield. As he closed the distance, the high beams flooded the car in a blinding white light. The armed man in the passenger seat turned sharply, momentarily stunned by the sudden glare. João laid on the horn, the deafening blast echoing across the empty highway, each note a warning and a declaration. Someone had seen them, and they were no longer in control. The car's driver tried to start the engine, but João swung the truck slightly, forcing the smaller vehicle toward the guardrail. It wasn't a collision, but a calculated maneuver, boxing them in. The child in the back seat took the opportunity to move toward the opposite door, away from the threat. João's eyes locked on them for a split second, a silent promise that he wouldn't let harm come their way. One of the men inside the car reached for something, the glint of the weapon catching the light again. João felt a surge of adrenaline. He inched the truck forward, making the sheer size of the machine an undeniable threat. The criminals hesitated, realizing they were trapped. At that moment, João adjusted the angle of the truck to give the family a narrow opening. He leaned out the window, shouting for them to get out. The father, bruised and disoriented, managed to shove the back door open. The mother pulled the child free, stumbling onto the wet pavement. With his truck still blocking any escape, João reversed just enough to keep the criminals contained. The horn blared again, echoing into the night, a call for attention to anyone nearby. His hands were steady on the wheel, his focus absolute. This wasn't just a delivery route anymore. It had become a battleground, and João had chosen his side. The rain was coming down harder now, the rhythmic patter against the metal roof of João's truck mixing with the deep growl of its idling engine. His headlights still bathed the smaller car in an unforgiving white glare, keeping the armed men inside off balance. João knew he couldn't hold them indefinitely. At any moment, they might make a desperate move, and he would need backup before things escalated beyond his control. He reached for his CB radio again, his voice steady but urgent as he called out to any nearby truckers. Years of driving had built a network of friendships and unspoken trust among the men and women of the road, and that trust was about to be tested. Within seconds, a familiar voice crackled through the static answering his call. João quickly explained the situation, his words sharp and efficient. He didn't need to say much. Every trucker listening knew exactly what was at stake. 5 minutes later, faint beams of light appeared on the horizon, growing larger as they approached. 2 massive trucks emerged from the darkness, engines rumbling like approaching thunder. They slowed as they neared João's position, instinctively understanding what needed to be done. One truck angled itself behind João's, forming a barrier that completely blocked the road from the rear. The other positioned itself at an angle across the opposite lane, closing off any remaining escape route. The criminals inside the car were now boxed in from every direction. The only way out would be on foot, and that meant abandoning their plan entirely. João could see them arguing inside the vehicle, their movements frantic, their confidence crumbling under the weight of the situation. As the tension thickened, the sound of sirens began to pierce the rain-soaked air. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, cutting through the darkness. João felt a surge of relief. Someone else must have called the authorities after seeing the growing blockade. Within moments, 2 police cars arrived, their tires spraying water as they skidded to a halt. Officers exited with weapons drawn, shouting commands toward the suspects. The truckers didn't move from their positions. They kept their rigs exactly where they were, engines humming, acting as steel walls until the scene was fully under control. The criminals, realizing they were completely outmatched, slowly raised their hands and stepped out of the car, the rain plastering their clothes to their skin. The officers moved in quickly, securing the suspects and guiding the terrified family to safety. João stepped down from his truck, his boots splashing into shallow puddles as he walked toward the family. The mother clutched her child tightly, still trembling, while the father, visibly shaken, reached out to grip João's shoulder. No words were exchanged in that moment. None were needed. The gratitude was written plainly in their eyes. The officers began collecting statements, while the other truckers gave João knowing nods. They didn't need recognition or praise. They were simply doing what they believed was right. For João, the sight of that family standing together again was all the reward he needed. The convoy of trucks and flashing police lights turned the lonely stretch of highway into a scene of solidarity and victory. The road was no longer silent. It carried the echoes of courage, unity, and the undeniable truth that sometimes strangers become heroes in the most unexpected moments. Happy ending and gratitude. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the sound of water dripping from the edges of the trucks, echoing in the now quiet night. The flashing lights from the police cruisers painted the wet asphalt in streaks of red and blue, a surreal reminder of how close this night had come to ending in tragedy. The suspects were already in custody, sitting handcuffed in the back of a squad car, their earlier aggression replaced by defeated silence. The family stood off to the side, under the partial shelter of one of the trucks. The mother still held her child close, as if afraid to let go, her fingers gripping the fabric of their jacket, as though it might keep them tethered to safety. The father was speaking quietly with an officer, his voice low and unsteady, but his eyes kept drifting toward João, as if trying to process the fact that this man, a stranger, had put himself between them and danger without hesitation. João stood a few steps away, leaning slightly against the side of his truck, his hands resting loosely in front of him. The adrenaline that had fueled him through the encounter was slowly wearing off, replaced by a deep sense of relief. He wasn't one to seek attention, and now that the danger had passed, he felt a bit out of place in the center of it all. Still, he knew he couldn't just slip away. There were questions to answer, statements to give, and above all, people who deserved reassurance. When the father finally approached, he did so with a hesitant smile that quickly broke under the weight of his emotions. Without warning, he wrapped his arms around João in a firm embrace. It wasn't a quick or polite gesture. It was a raw expression of gratitude, the kind of hug that says more than words ever could. The mother soon followed, tears streaming down her face as she whispered a quiet thank you, her voice cracking. For João, it was almost overwhelming. He wasn't used to being called a hero. In his mind, he had simply done what anyone should do when they see someone in danger. But looking at the child, safe, alive, and clinging to their mother, he understood why they saw it differently. For them, his decision to act had been the turning point between an unthinkable loss and the chance to go home together. The police finished their work, and the family was escorted to a waiting vehicle that would take them somewhere safe for the night. Before they left, the father turned one last time and said, "You didn't just save us. You reminded me there are still good people out there." João didn't respond with words. He simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that he had heard and understood. Days later, back at his usual route, João stopped at a familiar roadside diner. As he stepped inside, conversations quieted for a moment, and then a few drivers at the counter raised their cups toward him in silent salute. Word had traveled fast, and now people knew him by a new name, the Highway Angel. He didn't dwell on the title, but in the quiet moments on the road. He thought about that night and how a single choice had changed everything. In the end, it wasn't about recognition or pride. It was about knowing that when the moment came, he had chosen to stand his ground, and because of that, a family was still together. That, to João, was worth more than anything the road could ever give him. The highway was quiet again, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when the world feels still yet somehow changed. João was back behind the wheel, the hum of the engine steady, the road stretching endlessly ahead. The events of that night replayed in his mind, not as a story of danger, but as a reminder of how quickly life can shift from ordinary to extraordinary. In truth, João never set out to be a hero. He wasn't looking for recognition or praise. He was simply a man who saw someone in trouble and refused to look away. And maybe that's the real message, that courage isn't born from grand plans or perfect timing, but from the choice to act when it would be easier to stay silent, to pass by, to pretend it's not your problem. We don't need to be behind the wheel of a truck to face moments like this. Every day, in ways big or small, we all pass by situations where someone needs help. A stranger in distress, a friend fighting a silent battle, a neighbor struggling in ways they never speak about. The question is, will we stop? Will we get involved? Or will we let the moment pass and wonder later what might have been different if we had acted? That night, João's decision gave a family another chance at life. And while not every act of courage will make headlines, each one leaves a mark on the person we help and on ourselves. Because deep down, when we choose to step in, we prove that humanity is still alive on this road we all share. And now I want to hear from you. If you were in João's place, alone on that dark highway, would you have the courage to stop? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. And your perspective might inspire someone else to act when their moment comes. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. In the next video, we'll bring you another real story from the road. One even more unbelievable than this, where the hero didn't just save lives, but changed the fate of an entire town. You won't want to miss it.